Hello, I'm Sandra Smith, and I am a fiber artist. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, and I've been quilting since the 1980s, thereabouts. I have a lot of work, if anyone is interested, on my website at sandrasmithquilts.com. I do a variety of work, and I just love it. It helped keep me sane during the COVID lockdown and even since and before. So that's me. And if you want to know any more, really visit my website, sandrasmithquilts.com, to see more of my work and learn more about me. So I am currently part of a show, Quilted Connections, here at the Peale Museum. And that exhibition came as a result of some work that I did with a couple of my quilting buddies, Rosalind Robinson and Glenda Richardson. The three of us were involved in creating two donor quilts that are on exhibit at the Peale from now until forever, we hope, thanking a number of people for keeping the Peale Museum alive. And so we worked on those quilts. Oh, it took about a year. We had a lot of fun. We looked at many, many, many stories on the quilt or on the Peale's museum site and learned a lot about the museum and was able to then take those ideas and those stories and depict them in cloth. I hope that when you see it, you'll love it. Here's a little bit about some of my work. I have 5 quilts in the exhibit, Quilted Connections, there at the Peale. And what I tried to do when I put those quilts into the show was to show a variety of the types of work that I do. I make all sorts of quilts, and depending on the day and my mood, um, they are done in various ways. So there are 2 quilts in the show. One's called Zig and the other one is called Zag. And they are what we call whole cloth quilts, where I took an entire piece of fabric and I quilted it, and then I added in a technique called applique, I fused other fabrics on top. And so zig and zag, I can never keep them straight. I finally figured it out. I think zag is the one with the jagged orange at the top. I could be wrong though. Check the labels in the exhibition because I always mess it up. Another quilt that I made and have in the show is called Masquerade. And Masquerade is done using a long batik panel, and that panel has the faces of, I believe, 5 figures. And so I took that panel and then I surrounded it with other pieces of fabric and other masks. And so that one is a batik with stuff all around it. Kind of cool, kind of cool. And I remember when I was making my masquerade quilt, I had some fabric that I used as the background around the panel, and it was a dark brown with some orange in it that looked kind of like, I'm going to say, death. It was really, really kind of ominous. And my husband, who's one of my chief critics, looked at that and said, "Are you okay?" And he kept saying, "Are you feeling all right, honey? You know, that's really strange." So that prompted me to take that fabric out of the quilt and use something else. But Masquerade has kind of like that history behind it. Each one of these quilts has stories, just like the Peale has stories. A third quilt that I have in the show is called The River. And the river is a quilt that is made so that it is hanging perpendicular. But when I made it, I had intended for it to go horizontal. But I was with a group of people and we were critiquing each other's work and trying to figure out the best way to quilt those pieces once they were pieced. And they said, "You know what, Sandra, if you hang it perpendicular, it looks a lot different, huh?" And it looks like a river with side sand or whatever on the sides. So I named it the river. And what's particular about that quilt is it's made from an Indonesian sarong. And the sarong was just too beautiful to cut and to make into little tiny pieces. So I wanted to keep it in chunks that were able to keep the integrity of the design of the fabric. And so what I did is I chunked it, if you will, technical term, and I added African fabrics and other batik fabrics around my chunks in order to keep my design. And when I went to quilt that one, if you look at that one carefully when you go to the show, it is the sarong has what parallel lines, fabric. It's woven so that you can see like these parallel lines. And I had intended to quilt up and down these parallel lines. Well, as I started quilting, it got all bunched up and icky, another technical term. So I decided to do a zigzag pattern of stitching in between these parallel lines. And that was way cool. I like the impact of that. So that's kind of the story of the river quilt. There were two other quilts that I made, and I called them, one of them Wildfire, and it's got a lot of oranges and reds and looks like a fire. There's some fabric in there that's a flame kind of a design. And its counterpart is called Peaceful Water, Piece, water, because what I did with those is I actually pieced those quilts. So those quilts are made using a technique where you take a piece of fabric and you add another one and add another one and add another one. So you have pieces of fabric put together to make a whole cloth. And so those guys were made from a combination of batik fabrics made here in the United States, some hand-dyed fabric made by a woman who lives out in Washington State, and a bunch of other stuff. And in those, I used a lot of black and white fabrics integrated with these others. So that's the gist of the 5 quilts that I have in the show. Another thing that I will share with the group is my inclusion in this show at the Peale. As a result, as I said, of making the donor quilts, Nancy Proctor asked us, Glenda, Roz, and I, to if we wanted to do a show of our work, and we were like, oh no, wow, what an honor. So what we did, it came out really well, but what we did, how we figured out what to put in it, was based on the size of the walls that we had to cover. And so we looked at our stash of quilts that we had, and I'm the more, I guess, nerdy of the group. So I took the map of the room and I figured out what the sizes were of the spots and figured out what fit in each space. We plugged them in and they look kind of good together. We hope you enjoy this show.